There we are. Okay. Well, since I appear to be the person who has the camera open, I'll say this is the Thursday, May 20th, 2021 Heritage Preservation Commission retreat. And I apologize, I did not think to have a script for this. So we're meeting based on remote participation due to the declared local health pandemic. And I'll do a roll call so that we can verify presence of a quorum, and then I'll turn it over to Andrea Burke, who is the Historic Preservation Supervisor. So with that, Maureen Bjornberg.
Here.
Ethan Bootie.
Here.
Barbara Howard.
Here.
Johnson. I should say Andrew T. Johnson. Not to be confused with the council member. Alicia Nystrom.
Here.
Kimberly Sandbolt. I'm still coming. Ian Stady.
Here.
Margot Struthers.
Here.
Evelyn Sundberg.
Here.
Vanderek.
Here.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Rachel, do you forgive me? It's the first time we're doing the roll call for this. Do you verify the presence of a quorum?
There are 9 members present, and then I think Commissioner Sandbolt just joined us. Are you with us, Miss Commissioner Sandbolt?
Yes.
Okay, so that makes wait a minute.
9.
Yeah, so there's 9 members present. So that verifies presence of quorum if you would like to proceed.
Thank you. Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, we're doing things a little different. We're kind of falling more in line with the way the clerks have kind of running some of the other commission meetings. So this is a special meeting, as we're officially calling it, of the HPC, even though I know that the term is kind of retreat. But we do this about twice a year for some of our new commissioners. And it's kind of a chance for us to get together and just talk about topics that we don't necessarily always talk about during regular business when we're meeting twice a month, and some larger items, things that staff's up to, larger initiatives we're working on, larger initiatives that maybe we want to work on, questions that commissioners may have. So that's kind of the purpose of this. And we usually start out with just kind of welcome and introductions, because almost every round we have new commissioners, and it's good to hear just, brief background from everyone, kind of what they're, why they're here. And I know the commissioners have been here, have done this every single time, and you've probably heard all of your stories. So it's up to you for how much background, at least for some of our longer standing commissioners, you want to give in terms of your, brief intro. And then I, would just call on some of the newer commissioners, specifically, Commissioner Bootie, Commissioner Nystrom, and Commissioner Struthers, if they want to give a couple extra sentences. They have joined us as recently as this winter. The first time we're kind of all sort of informally talking, but and then after that, I figure I will just, I did a longer introductions because I wanted to give some updates that staff has been working on since August of 2020. And just some other things that are happening right now as things are changing again rapidly. But I can go first. Obviously, you guys mostly know who I am, and I'm Andrea Burke, and I'm the supervisor for this team. If you probably all know, I started off at the city many, many years ago, left for a long time, worked out east for a long time for the State Historic Preservation Office, and then came back to Minneapolis probably, 2.5 years ago. And so we have, created this team, which is great. And the first, update I'll give, and just since we're on the topic of me at the moment, we are now just a team of 3, myself, and then John and Rob, who are also on this call. Sheila Vemmer is no longer with us as of last October. So we are working on trying to rehire in that position It is not looking like it will be until 2022, but you will see our three familiar faces more frequently, as you mostly usually see mine at each of the meetings. Except as you probably caught in an email that I sent, I will be going on maternity leave in early to mid-August. Sometime at that point, I'm having my second child, and we'll be out for pretty much, standard 3 months, 12 weeks. I was hoping to have more of a plan by the time we had this retreat, and I don't, due to some other things that are happening. But I will leave you in good hands, and we will have something in place for you to, to reach out to questions and try to keep, the group going as much as we can. But, John and Rob are great resources. And it may be Kimberly that may be running meetings. It may be an alternate, but I have not plotted that out yet. But I did want to just make that known. And I guess with that, what I'll probably do is I just will go around and call on the names that I see, because I've got all the names kind of in front of me. And if you want to just give a little quick intro, we can kind of just reintroduce ourselves virtually, mostly to some of our new commissioners. So I will start with Murray.
I knew I was going to be first. All right, so I am Murray Bjornberg, and I joined the commission like right when the pandemic started. So I've actually never been to a in-person meeting before. My background, I grew up in Minneapolis, and then I went to the U of M and got my undergrad in architecture, and then got my master's in heritage preservation from the U also. And then sort of straight out of school, I started working as a project manager for the Minnesota Historical Society. And I am now actually officially, as of this week, the capital planning manager over there in the facilities and risk management. So lately, I have been project managing the historic Fort Snelling revitalization project. So that has been a great experience. And I've really enjoyed being on the HPC, although I will say I am also looking forward to in-person meetings and getting to see everybody's faces and reactions. I think that that's one thing that I've really missed about the virtual format. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll go to Ethan Bootie, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ethan Bootie. A little background about myself. So I'm originally from Columbia, Missouri, and I moved to Minnesota about 10 years ago now for college. I'm a graduate of St. Olaf, and my background there was in art history, and moved to Minneapolis shortly after graduating, and did a year of AmeriCorps service with a local nonprofit here called Rebuilding Together. And then eventually went on to my master's in historic preservation at Columbia out east. So my background's in historic preservation. I've been working at Rethos, which is formerly the Preservation Alliance of Minnesota, since 2019. So I'm coming up on 2 years here. And I'm the real estate manager, which we mostly do work with loans to projects using state historic tax credits, which now spans over 5 states. And I'm really excited to work there and be a part of another great preservation nonprofit, and happy to join the commission. I'm definitely also looking forward to seeing people in person and actually going to a meeting. It's kind of been a little weird adjusting to doing virtual meetings, but yeah, I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you. Alicia Nystrom.
Okay, hi. You guys can call me Allie. My full name is Alicia, but I rarely answer to it. But either way, you can call me either one. I am also a product of Minnesota. I grew up in the western suburbs of Minneapolis and went and got my undergrad in art history at Macalester. And then I went to do restoration and preservation work abroad I did some work in Italy and then some in Israel, and then decided to get my master's in historic preservation. I did the same program that Murray did at the U, and I currently work at Dominium, more on the financial planning analysis side, but obviously they're very involved at Fort Snelling as they're working on the Upper Post. So it's kind of how I landed there as I was working on a project in graduate school related to it. So yeah, I am very excited, like everyone is, to get back to seeing people's faces in real life rather than virtually. I just saw my own team from work last night for the first time in person, and I have to say it was very nice to see people face to face. So I'm excited, and I'm really excited to be a part of the Heritage Preservation Commission, and looking forward to when we get to see each other in person. And my dog almost always attends, and he's on my lap in our virtual meetings. So if anyone's wondering why I'm sitting weird, he's on my lap. But yeah, nice to meet you all.
Thank you. Barbara Howard.
Hello, Barbara Howard. I've been on the commission for 4 years, I think, 2017. Does that make 4 years? I think so. And I blame Ginny Lakovic, who's a previous commission member who begged me to apply after I left the SHPO in Minnesota. My background, I'm trained in architecture from Iowa State University, but never became an architect. I ended up in the preservation field. I too have a graduate degree from Columbia University in New York City, but I've been working in SHPOs for the last 15 years, well, until 5 years ago I was in SHPOs. I was in the Iowa SHPO and the Minnesota SHPO, and now I am working part-time for the DOT in their cultural resources unit, and I am running my own business, Stonebridge Learning, and I just joined the training team for the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions for their camp training.
Thank you. Ian Stady.
Hi, I'm Ian Stady. I've been involved with history for a long time. I was a tour guide at the Sibley House historic site when I was in college. When I was in library school, I worked at the Wisconsin Historical Society. I did some of the archival track. That got me into local history work at the special collections at the Hennepin County Library, and got to know some folks that work in this field and got really interested in it. So I served as I've been on the commission since 2013, and I was the vice chair for some part of that. And yeah, I'm looking forward to in-person meetings again too. And yeah, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Rob Scalecki, he is on staff. You guys all know.
Hopefully you should all know me. I'm Rob Scalecki. I've been here for almost 2 years now, although you've probably all seen me for a little over a year when I started bringing projects in front of you. Let's see. I have 2 bachelor's degrees from Iowa State University in history and sociology. I started my preservation track there. I worked for the city of Ames. I went to the University of Minnesota and got a master's in heritage studies and public history in their historic preservation section. I've worked for the Minnesota SHPO, the National Park Service, Preservation Alliance of Minnesota. Yeah, and then I came here, so most of you are probably pretty familiar with seeing me.
Thank you, Rob. Bree, I'm not going to skip over you personally. I feel like you have great things to say too. But we'll introduce you when you help talk about cultural districts. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Cool. Thank you. John Smoley, also on staff.
Hey, you all know me, John Smoley, historian, planner. Happy to be at your service working with you all. Thank you for your service. You all make some tough decisions, and we appreciate your work.
Thanks, John. Claire.
Hey guys, so my name is Claire Vanderek. This I think is I just re-upped on the commission, so I either on my 4th year, 3rd year. I'm not sure. Provided me a connection to historic preservation in a totally different way. I really appreciate the opportunity. I have my educational background is my undergrad is in real estate finance and architecture, and then I have a master's degree in historic preservation. But professionally, currently, I work as a real estate developer for Schaefer Richardson, and I specialize in affordable housing. So I have yet in my professional career to get the opportunity to work on a preservation deal. However, that's always been a goal of mine. But it's why serving in the HPC is so great, having the opportunity to talk about historic preservation with all of you fine folks. So appreciate it. Glad to be here. I really always enjoy these retreats. So thanks for organizing, Andrea.
Thank you. You're welcome. Let's do, not you, Ken, nothing on you. Madeline Sundberg.
Hello, I'm Madeline Sundberg. You see me a lot during our virtual meetings, which has been a strange adjustment for me to be like on the camera all the time here. I am originally from outside Boston, and so I am an East Coaster. I did my undergrad at Smith College and moved here for graduate school. So I went to the U of M. I got my master's in architecture as well as my master's in heritage preservation. And then I got a job as a historic architect at McDonald and Mack Architects, which is why I stayed here. So you will see as the meetings go on for our new commissioners, I recuse myself on a lot of items. So that's when I abstain from voting, because any projects that are like related to my firm or a client or something, I abstain on. So you'll see that a lot as we keep going. I've been on the HPC since 2017, same time as Barbara. And this is, I guess, my 2nd year as chair. But I think the first meeting I became chair was the first meeting we did virtually with the pandemic. So I've like really only, I think, chaired in this strange virtual world. I know Ginny sent me a message saying she was really glad we switched when we did, because she never had to figure out how to do the virtual meetings. She snuck in under the wire there. Yeah, I think that's the basics about me. Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you. Kimberly Sandbolt.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kimberly Sandbolt. I've been on the Preservation Commission since, I think, 2019. I am also a recruit of Ginny Lakovic. I worked with Ginny for about 10 years while I was at HGA. I have a master's degree in architecture and was working at HGA. I've always had an interest in historic preservation. Where I went to school at NDSU, we didn't have specialty, but always interested in it, and have had some career opportunities to work on historic buildings. Most recently, and probably most recognizable, is the Minnesota State Capitol renovation. So I worked on that project for about 5 years, which kind of solidified me as an architect who tries to do historic preservation and renovation projects as much as possible. So that's kind of my background. And yeah, I've been sitting on the commission for a couple of years now and really enjoy the different perspective, and have also enjoyed getting to know my fellow commissioners, and can't wait till we're back in person as well.
Thank you. And last, Margot Struthers.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I was just appointed with Ethan and Alyssa, and my background in history is sort of slim. I was a history major at Carleton College many years ago, and I have lived in what is now the Lyndhurst Historical District for 40 years, and have had an interest in history all of this time. working and attending and belonging to the Minnesota Historical Society, the Hennepin History Museum, the Linden Hills History Group, and the Wayzata Historical Society. So I've kept my interest in history in those areas, but I'm really looking forward to working with all of you on these issues. My professional background is that I am just a newly retired healthcare and nonprofit lawyer. I worked for 45 years representing healthcare clients and a lot of nonprofits, most of which were also in the healthcare area. So I'm kind of interested in process and how things get done. So that may have some relevance to what the HPC does, and I'm very much looking forward to working with all of you.
Thank you, Margot. I think that is pretty much everyone. And if I forgot somebody, please speak up now. I don't think so. I think I got everyone. So I wanted to, with that, once again, you guys, thank you very much for spending your Thursday starting at 3. I know you all have jobs and lives, so I appreciate it. Just a couple updates on some of the stuff we've been working on since August of last year, or throughout the last year. I think we had a topic at our last retreat about updating the sign guidelines, and John has been working on that. And we do have a draft that staff has looked at. Not anything that I think we all had comments. We took a stab at it, and John's working on revising them in his time. And then I think our plan for that is that we will bring them forward first, maybe as a discussion item, just to give some time, take a look at them before actually voting on them. And I think, John, we got to send them to SHPO for 60 days first, probably, right?
We could do that. We could bring them to the HPC if you all just want to take a look at them before they go for official comment. We can be flexible in that sense. But yes, there is a mandatory, per state law, a 60-day review period that SHPO has an opportunity to comment during.
Yeah. So just keep an eye out for that. We'll be adding that to an agenda sometime here when we're able to get those into a more finalized draft form. But, some of the big changes I think we took into consideration some of your comments, as well as just aligning it better with the zoning code, aligning it better with more recent legal decisions on what we can and can't regulate, simplifying some stuff, adding some other stuff, adding some more pictures, trying to take care of some conundrums that we see coming up a lot when we review. I mean, we review a lot of the signs, very few actually come through to the commission. And I think based on your comments, you were interested in seeing fewer of them come through the commission. So we're kind of tweaking them to that, but I'm calling them sign guidelines 2.0. But so just keep that out in the back of your mind, you'll see it. Lyndhurst design guidelines, those are almost done. I have to send them to SHPO. The consultant is giving me almost the final draft. We've been holding some resident community meetings, as well as some small work group meetings that Madeline and Ian have participated in. Thank you for doing that. And, we've gotten some feedback, and we'll see how it goes. I think we've got something we can carry forward. I've got to take a look at the final draft here before I send them to SHPO. I don't think they will, by the time I get it back from SHPO, I don't think it'll be me bringing it to you. Possibly, if I can get this done very quickly and get it to him, I might still be here by the time we bring them through. But they'll come through you for adoption after SHPO has a chance to look at them for 60 days. And the residents played a part in it. I don't think they're going to be 100% on board with it. And the way I sort of described it in some of the meetings was, not everybody's going to get what they want with these, including us, including the residents. And if we can find a unhappy medium, maybe, or happy medium, we've done a good job. So that will be coming through. We did win a legacy grant for property that was put under interim protection back in February, the 4501 Hiawatha Avenue, which is the former Fire Station 24. We did get a award of that back in March. And so we actually have that out for RFP right now to hire a consultant to put together the study for that. So that will eventually be coming through after we study that and get a final report back from a consultant once we pick a consultant. But that was an update on that. So we were very happy to get a legacy grant on that. I've noticed it being an election year for council members, we've had some requests for nominations, as a council member can make a nomination. So you may see a few coming through. We have some for a collection of churches in Ward 1 over in Northeast that John is working on. We haven't gotten to the point of bringing it forward for nomination yet, but you'll see these just to give you an idea of some of the stuff that will be coming through. But not giving you enough information to actually vote on or anything right now. The National Trust Grant, this has been a little slow going, and I will confess this is my deal. We do have part of the money for this. I am working on drafting the RFP, which I feel very fish out of water in drafting. Was hoping to have it done much longer ago, but I've had to be out for longer periods of time than I would have liked over the last 2 months here, and working on some other stuff. But I'm hoping to get that done relatively soon here and get that out for bid, to get a community organizer to start working on some of those meetings. And I know a while back I had asked for some volunteers from the commission to kind of help sit in on these, and forgive me, I can't remember who it was, but I would say hold off on right now until let me get this RFP drafted, finished, finalized out, and then we can kind of work on doing that. I mean, this will be done before I go out in a few months. So, and then, I'll be handing it off, I think, as some of these community engagement meetings are happening to, to staff and to Rob and John and some others too, to kind of help while I'm out. But that's just kind of on the horizon. We did finish up, I feel like I made an announcement at some meeting a while ago, but we finished up a context study that we won another legacy grant for a few years ago. It was the Minneapolis in the Modern Era context study. It was very thorough, very in-depth. New History had completed it. And it is up on the web now, although our website just got a complete overhaul unexpectedly. Well, of course, some people knew about it. We didn't know about it. So it is up there. But, it's my goal to get more things up on the web and helping that. It's right now, it's just not at the top of the list. But if anybody, I think I had this as a discussion item, but if anybody wants to know more, I can always direct you to the link. It's almost 300 pages, 400 pages. But it provides a really good, context, background for beginning to scratch the surface and start handling some of these resources that are reaching 50 years of age, and seem to be a very hot topic. You've seen several resources before you for demolitions that have seemed to have garnered a lot of attention, largely being in the downtown area. But we're hoping, to build off of this context study in the future when we have more resources. But I just wanted to make a mention of that. We have applied for another CLG grant this year, excuse me. We have lots of ideas and priorities, but I think this one that seemed to be coming up more often than not, at least at a staff level, was to revise the Washburn Fair Oaks design guidelines. We seem to be running into a lot of sticky issues with interpretation on some of the way those guidelines are worded. And something happened recently. I can't remember what it was. Rob probably knows, or John knows, that made us kind of prompt to go down this road. And I think John, I know you have, can you give the commission a really quick update on where we are with that CLG grant? I think we've been partially awarded, is that right?
Verbally, yes, but we have not received official notification. So, and, up front, we, tried to work closely with SHPO to identify whether the focus of the grant should be, jumping right into design guidelines or trying to update our inventory of contributing and non-contributing properties. It's an interesting district in that it is certified for tax credit applications, and it was certified over 30 years ago, but the certification documentation was very minimal. And after our pre-application focused on design guidelines, in the end, we opted to go with, developing an inventory of contributing and non-contributing properties in this, very large district that is certainly challenged in terms of a lot of the property owners and their ability to maintain those structures. So, but we've received verbal word that we will be getting the grant, and we look forward to giving you updates on that and hiring a consultant to get that work done to make this, large district preservation in this large district a bit more transparent for property owners, especially those who have the wherewithal to apply for, federal and state historic preservation tax credits. This documentation will help them and help state officials and federal officials get through that part one a little more easily.
Thank you. And then just the last one I wanted to give a quick update on. This was a district you had voted for to recommend designation for back in March of 2020. Glendale townhouses. This has not gone to the next step in the designation process. I can't remember. I think one of these times over the last year I've updated you on it. The council member has opted to wait. Initially, we had voted on this, or you had voted on this probably a week or two before the world kind of shut down and changed, and we went to virtual meetings. And the council member had desires to wait till it was in person again, and there's a lot of politics involved, I'll just put it that way. And so that might be going to the next step, which would be the newly reconfigured Business Inspections, Housing and Zoning Committee, subcommittee of the City Council, possibly this summer, June or July, hoping to do it before I have my second child. So I'm just kind of waiting for the green light on that. It will be interesting to see what happens with that. But just wanted to give you an update as to why maybe you haven't seen anything for that, or there's been no talk of design guidelines. There's been no update on that. That's because it's been essentially sitting on the back burner. Interim protection has run out, although there's no real current threat to it to demolish anything anytime soon. But that is the update I can give on that. And that's among the big things. We always kind of have little things that come up along the way, but for big projects, that's what we have going on right now. So I wanted to just give an update. And look at that, I'm like 3:36, I'm right on time. Does anybody have any questions about that, about any of those updates that I've given? You could just jump in if you want, and if not, I'll wait a couple seconds and then move on. All right, housekeeping. I want to try to, get this to a point. I think it's good just going over some of the legality stuff. I know we went over it in detail at the last retreat, and I don't have any intention of doing that again here, but just giving a quick refresher on the legality and duties of the HPC and staff, just, with some new commissioners, even though I've kind of incorporated this into the training now that in orientation, we give new commissioners, but I wanted to just give a really quick overview of it again, so it just stays fresh in everyone's minds as we go into another kind of 6-month cycle of HPC. I think it's always important to be fresh on. But I'll keep it quick and brief. I'm not going to have any handouts on this. I know I did a big handout last time. You're just going to stare at my face for a while. And then the blinding sun behind me too. But, duties of the HPC, HPC is established with the powers and authorities granted under the state enabling legislation. That's how we are here and doing what we're doing and allowed to do what we're doing. And the primary purpose is to preserve and promote historic resources, CLG status, which is certified local government, enables us as the local government to apply for federal matching grants, such as the CLG grant program that John just talked about, to preserve historic properties. And it encourages, the integration of historic preservation into local government policy. It kind of gives us, it's an incentive in a way. CLG responsibilities. Minneapolis is a CLG, certified local government. We establish and maintain a qualified HPC. We maintain a system for identifying historic properties. We enforce appropriate legislation for the designation and protection of historic properties. We provide for public participation in the preservation program. We play an expanded role in nominating properties to the National Register. So for some of you newer commissioners, you'll see us bring items through that aren't quite land use applications. They're National Register nominations that we make a formal recommendation on back to the State Historic Preservation Office. And we perform other agreed upon functions, delegated by the State Historic Preservation Office. I'm not going to, go a whole much into open meeting laws other than to just say, open meeting laws are the laws in each state that govern public access to governmental meetings. The big points of it are that everything we're doing is transparent, it's properly noticed. Conversations we're having about projects are happening publicly before, in front of a public body. And not, private conversations such as via email or even in the chat, as we've all gotten much more familiar with virtual meetings and being careful to just state when we want to speak versus voicing our specific comment in the chat, because that all becomes part of the public record as well. That's pretty much the gist of it. And as I've mentioned too, when the special group of all of you get together and when we have quorum sort of dictates when these open meeting laws, kind of get triggered. And I think everybody, since kind of the last training has done a great job of being conscious of that and making note of when we reach out and talk about stuff. And I appreciate that a lot. So thank you. Legislative versus quasi-judicial decisions. This is always one that I feel like it takes several hits to get into the brain and to be able to process it, but it makes a big deal in what we do and the certain applications and decisions and the types of recommendations that are made. But a legislative decision is one that's a policy decision adopted by the policymakers, and in the city of Minneapolis, that's the city council. It's a new rule that changes the requirement. So it's adding a designation to a property that puts new, design control on it. Conservation districts, same thing. Ordinance changes. We haven't had an ordinance change in a while up until the one I just presented at the last meeting. So we're a little rusty in carrying these through, but we've had some discussions, at least I've had some discussions with the clerks on streamlining this. So I anticipate some more of these coming through as we kind of slowly work to update the ordinance in the 21st century. And as we notice things that are a little outdated, to change, getting a better process that's more in line with especially how Planning Commission does it and how with the Board of Adjustment does it. So you may see some more of that, but I think we'll have a better understanding where we'll probably have a public hearing at HPC versus the way this last one went, where it's going to happen at Biz, like I said, relearning some stuff here. But the HPC's role is on a legislative decision is that they can review, discuss, and recommend, but the final decision is by the city council. So for an ordinance change or a designation, your power is just strictly to recommend, review, and recommend. Quasi-judicial, now, this is where the proceeding is conducted by the officials. That's similar to a court proceeding. And it's, a hearing. That's why we have public hearings. A court may review a decision arising from a quasi-judicial proceeding. And the quasi-judicial power refers to the power vested into the commissions established by law to determine the rights of those who appear before it. So you are the commission. C of A is is a quasi-judicial decision. And it's been described as the power or duty to investigate and draw conclusions from such investigations. So demolitions, historic variances, C of A's, which is the majority of the projects you see before you. And that also just kind of means that an applicant has an opportunity to appeal your decision to a higher body if they are dissatisfied with the outcome. And we've been getting a number of these lately. And I don't see it as anything wrong. You know, appeals happen. People have the opportunity and the choice to do them. And I don't see it as a ding on the staff member. Or I don't see it as a ding on the commission. It's just, it's a right out there. And we always tell applicants, if you're unhappy with your outcome, you have the right to an appeal, and go ahead and do your appeal. And in some cases, the council will overturn HPC, and in other cases they don't. And there's, you know, I can't predict kind of which way it's going to go. In some cases, I try and play my hand at tarot cards, but I don't always win. The big things about requirements in a quasi-judicial proceeding is that you're consistent with your recommendations, which are based on sound findings of fact. And I think y'all are doing great with when you go to overturn a staff recommendation, making findings. I appreciate it a lot. You know, following and applying the standards and guidelines consistently across projects as best you can. You know, it's hard because every project, every district, every building is different. And just keeping in mind that if not, you know, you can be challenged on being arbitrary and capricious, and to keep in mind that, you know, I think your question came up as like, well, you know, who might challenge? And the thing is, like, at the end of the day, it's going to be us that gets challenged. You know, we're the ones that are going to be called before the hearing, and, you know, it'll be our city attorneys, and it'll be the city that gets called, and the city that's paying the money to litigate in court. And it's also just, you know, good practice and good standing to be consistent in decisions and to try to apply. And I think I've been hearing great discussion when you have all gone to go discuss a project of, well, you know, this is what I'm thinking, but then there's this too. And I know we need to keep this in mind as we do this, and keeping that all on the record, and has been wonderful and very helpful for staff as we move forward and, you know, and write our staff reports and review projects. And also just to hear what, you know, you're thinking when projects come through. The two big no's in quasi-judicial are no prejudgment, no disclosing votes before a meeting decision, and listening to all the testimony. And no ex parte communications. I know you've heard this a lot, but ex parte communications are discussing matters not on the record without the other side present. No private discussions, no discussing matters on social media. You know, you are the judge, the jury. You are to be there and to wait till everyone's there to hear all the information at once, and then to make your decision. And it's to be fair. You know, and we all have a degree of prejudgment, especially when you probably read these a week in advance, or a couple days, couple hours, couple minutes in advance of the meeting. You know, us too as staff, I think we struggle with certain projects that we feel particularly close to, and are trying to make, you know, apply the guidelines as objectively as possible, and try not to get our personal feelings about what might be happening get in the way. And it's tough. I know it's tough, but that is what we strive for. And then what is the role of neighborhood opposition to a land use application? Neighborhood opposition alone is not a legally sufficient reason for denial of an application. The city should take care to differentiate between the quantity and the quality of neighborhood concerns, and not that they're not valid. Often neighbors can raise very real and legitimate concerns. We had a very interesting one 2 nights ago, which I was a little floored by, but you know, it sparked an interesting discussion. Neighbors often, you know, provide important facts relevant to a decision, and the facts, you know, should speak directly to one or more of the required standards in the code, or the guidelines for a particular application, you know, or issue. but unsubstantiated opinions and reactions to a proposal do not form a legitimate basis for denial. And why is all this? Why do we do all this stuff? It's, because we quite honestly can get sued, and it costs a lot of money to litigate, and it costs taxpayers a lot of money. And oftentimes, if we don't follow the process, we'll lose every time. So it's just, once again, quick refresher. I know it's not the funnest topic, but it's always a good one to keep up to date on as we go into some of these meetings. And I'm sure we'll have another very interesting year of controversial items that come before us that we'll have to keep this in mind as we go through. I am done with that little measure. Any questions at all, comments on anything I've said, or else we can move forward?
Andrea, this is Barbara. I just wanted to thank you for giving us updates on when things have been appealed. That's something that didn't happen previously in any kind of regular fashion, and it helps to know when things are going forward and what they're going forward about. And I also wanted to mention, in relation to our discussion the other night, I didn't expect things to go the comments to be raised that they did raise at our meeting, but the more that you could put designation studies up online once the website gets figured out, sure, the better. Because had I realized that there might be concerns about that C of A, I would have tried to go find the designation study so that I could read how it was originally written. I love the staff summaries. There's usually enough information in the staff summary to give me enough knowledge to know how to talk about a C of A, but okay, sometimes when you can tell that there's something about to go a little crazy, it doesn't hurt to have the designation study before you, so you can look at that.
No, thank you. And just a quick side note, without trying to throw any shade, stuff, changes happen, things get lost. We were not entirely aware that the website was, we knew the website was going to be overhauled at some time. We were entirely aware. And then when it did happen, things kind of ended up in funny places. And then a number of other items got deleted. We're working on fixing it and trying to get some of that stuff back up on the web.
It all takes time. Understandable. I just wish that I would have thought to say, hey, could you send me that designation study before Tuesday's meeting? No. I just didn't expect the conversation that we had.
Sure. And if you guys do go to the website and you're like, oh, where did this go? We're working on it. Yeah, I had the same reaction, but it's fine. Sometimes you got to just move forward and make decisions, and you can't wait for the rest of the stuff to happen. So that's a little thing on background on the website changes, but thank you for that feedback. Yes, I am trying to stay current on the appeals, because I think it also it's good to know when something did get appealed and when it got approved on appeal, or if the HPC's decision got upheld. I think that provides good feedback to you as well. That is all I have on that. Kimberly Sandbolt, you wanted to talk about the Minneapolis Preservation Awards, and I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what the history of our involvement with the Minneapolis Preservation Awards is, but I kind of wanted to talk about it. For the last 2 years, I've been volunteering to help with the Minneapolis Preservation Awards, and they're co-sponsored with AIA Minneapolis and Preserve Minneapolis. And so as kind of co-sponsors, we have a commissioner sit in on the organizing committee. So we organize the event and the awards, and then we organize the planning committee also organizes for the jury to juror the nominations and to make selections for awards. And I kind of wanted to talk about a couple of things, because it came up this year that there was one of the nominations was not exactly happy about the fact that they weren't selected for an award. And I think there were some comments made on some social media about the preservation awards and the fairness of the process and all of that. So I kind of wanted to to give a report and let everybody know that that was an issue, and that the committee discussed afterwards in kind of a debrief that we do with the planning committee, that next year we're going to try and make it more clear how many awards will be awarded in each category, and also to make the kind of the submission requirements a little more clear, because I think there's been some vagueness in the submission process about what materials will be considered, how many materials are appropriate, and what kinds of materials can be submitted. So I think there's been kind of some vagueness there that's going to be cleared up. So I know that the committee is trying to resolve some of the issues that are seen as being unfair. But I wanted to know a little bit about the history and how the kind of current commission feels about us being involved in an award giving organization. So if somebody knows about the history, I'd like to hear how we got involved with giving away awards, and if we all feel like that's an appropriate thing for a board like ours to be involved in.
Yeah, Kimberly, I don't have a lot of that background, but I've been involved with Preserve Minneapolis and from a volunteer perspective for 11 years now. So I was on one of the early planning committees for the Preservation Awards many years ago. And my understanding was that it had started, and I could be completely wrong, but this is what my general understanding was. And if anybody else has better history on it, jump in. But it had started really as like a city-led thing, a municipal level thing that the HPC was heavily involved in, and then it transitioned out. The city had a budget for it at one point, and then the transition out of the city's budget, and that's where AIA Minnesota stepped in and took the lead on it, as far as particularly related to the budgetary issues. And Preserve Minneapolis was also supposed to be like co-leading, and the HPC was really supposed to be a backseat, like just kind of like just to have an involvement, have some oversight, and like having the extra feedback from the HPC that gets the closest to a lot of these projects. Whereas like AIA Minnesota and Preserve Minneapolis might not have access to the projects in the same way. But I don't think that the intent, when I was on the planning committee, like I said several years ago, I don't think the intent was that the HPC was heavily involved in planning or any of that stuff. It was more that the HPC was just there as another body of doing work in this preservation field. To get to your question, I think that I'd be interested to hear what some of the other commissioners feel about like the HPC's purview inside of recognition and award giving for projects. I think it's fine. I think that that's a great way for us to collectively celebrate historic preservation in this community. But I think that, I think it's also important that we're not dedicating a ton of time to it and everything too. Like, I think, if we can be a part of it, be a part of that process, honoring the fact that these projects are getting done, I think that makes sense for us to be a part of. But yeah, like this should be primarily led by private organizations like Preserve Minneapolis and AIA in Minnesota, in my opinion. So see if any other commissioners have some thoughts to weigh in, but that's the only amount of background that I have on it.
I was just wondering if anybody had gone to that training that Barb pointed out about community engagement last week. What was it called? Community Outreach Strategies for Historic Preservation Commissions and Boards. That sort of came up, and it seemed like most HPCs don't own awards. Like they have somebody like Preserve Minneapolis do them, and there's a separation. But I don't think that's universal. But that seemed like that was more likely than not that there was a separation. Did anybody else hear that?
I did not attend that, so I don't know if anybody else did.
Okay.
No, this is Barbara, and I wasn't able to attend it either. I'm attending the session that's next week or the week after, whatever that one is. But Yeah, I think most commissions do separate that, but I think that I personally think there's we could gain a lot by being part of the awards process, because right now all we're seen as is a C of A reviewer, and we're saying yes or no, and this is a way to celebrate. I don't think that city staff should have to spend a ton of time on it, especially since you're short-staffed already, Andrea, and will be a little bit even more so in the coming months. But I think it's great that the commission is present in those awards, even if we're not making the decision or the ones, actually handing out the awards. The fact that we're there shows that we have an interest in preservation beyond saying no to people trying to do work on their properties.
Yeah, I will just jump in and say that as the person who helped judge some of those, I definitely felt like we brought value to that jury. And so I would advocate for still having some minimal involvement, right? Especially because it felt like there was that one project that we were like, did this even go through? And I felt like that would have gotten really murky if they'd gotten an award without having been reviewed. So I guess I would sort of advocate for what Claire was talking about maybe having less of a role planning it, but still being sort of passively involved.
Yeah, and it's good to hear you guys' comments. I think, I was quite concerned when I heard that there was a couple parties that were not very happy with the process, and I don't necessarily want that kind of ambiguity leading to things coming back to the city, because I feel like it's a gray area. But I definitely talked with the other organizing committee members about being more specific about the requirements and being more transparent about how many awards are given in each category, because I feel like that would eliminate some of the perceived favoritism that might be happening behind the scenes. I agree that sitting on the jury, if we're going to be involved at all, I think sitting on the jury is a helpful role for us. We can definitely provide feedback, and like Maria alluded to, one of the things that I did was I double checked that all of the properties that were nominated had gone through the proper kind of review channels, and that we didn't have historic properties that were doing work on them, without being properly reviewed either by our staff or coming in front of the commission. So I think there's some things there. I just wanted to make sure that that everybody knew what was going on and that everybody was kind of in support of this effort. Andrea, I don't know if you had things you wanted to say, or Barbara.
No, I mean, I appreciate any time that you can spend, and I think, yeah, coming from when this used to be the HPC's responsibility, we used to organize it. I think it used to be called the Minneapolis Historic Preservation. I don't remember. I used to coordinate stuff for this back in 2002. And we used to do fancy lunches and all that other stuff. But then, yeah, it transitioned more to be, less city. And I think, run, which I think it helps because it puts us in a weird position, the ones that we're saying yes and no to applications, but then we're also recommending them. I don't think we should be doing that. I mean, I think it's okay to sit on the jury and to vote and to provide some feedback, especially in your one case, Murray, of oh, this would have been weird if this didn't even come through for review and they got an award. That type of feedback is good. And I do know more backstory on the troublesome issue that happened. And I will just say this was none of your faults. This is something that unfortunately has been a problem for a while, and is kind of we've seen before. So I think it is what it is. But I think any involvement is good. And I know Rob, having sat on the committee too, has kind of been, I think, struggled a little bit because I think we only can, there's limits to our participation, at least as the city staff. and what we can do and provide, just because we don't want to appear to be playing favorites or recommending projects we've voted on, which is tough, and but still want to play a contributing role in that we're not just, as Barb said, sitting up here saying yes or no to projects. That's kind of my thought, and I think this is great, and I'm grateful that the Preservation Awards has continued, and even during the pandemic. So it's, yeah, that's what I'll say.
I guess to weigh in with my 2 cents here, I've widely stayed out of the preservation awards because my firm always applies for at least one, and so it has seemed like totally a conflict of interest to be remotely involved in it. But I do like that the HPC does play a role. I think, as Barbara said, we sometimes have not a great perception of what we do, and I guess I view it as sort of like community outreach in a way. It's a type of community engagement. Even if it's mostly within the architectural community, I think that's still important, since we know plenty of architects don't really understand how the HPC works. And so I guess I would be supportive of the HPC continuing, especially I think as jury members. But since I personally have zero involvement, I also understand that volunteering additional time can be really hard. So I appreciate the efforts that everybody else has put into helping with it, since I have just like completely stayed out of it.
Kimberly, this is Barbara again. I'll just say that I've sat on the jury for a couple of years, and I appreciate the fact that we're looking at trying to make it a little bit more clear, because I found the process a little strange and haphazard, to say the least, and saying, oh, well, no one said we can't do 3 awards in this one category and then just not award the other one. I found that a little odd. So if you can bring more clarity to it, and it would resolve the issues related to whatever blew up this year, and I don't think I want to know any details. I think that's great. I do think we should stay involved in some way. And if we're not involved in any major way, I still think it's really important for us to be present at the awards ceremony and to promote the awards and try to, through our social media and professional channels, saying, hey, you guys know some great projects. Why don't you submit?
Yeah. Great. This is great feedback. Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of get a read on the group. And I think, I've been on the planning committee. Now this is the 2nd year that I helped with the planning committee, and I'll probably continue at least for another year, because I kind of want to see through some of the changes of being more specific about the requirements and being more specific about how many awards are going to go in each category and that kind of thing. And after that, I might start reaching out for other volunteers to be involved with the planning committee. It is a great group of people, and they've been putting together good programs, award programs. So very fun. But if anybody is interested, start thinking now if you would want to join me on the committee this year, because I know we're going to be losing a couple people that have been serving the last couple of years. So if you have an interest, I will be reaching out. So that's all I had on that. Thank you, Andrea, for the time.
Thank you. I thought about switching the next 2 items so we can give Bree some time here and then we move on, but then I realized this is a special meeting, it's being recorded and the agenda is posted, so I don't know if I really have the power to do that, but we'll continue on. We're right on time, so this is great. Treatment of non-contributing buildings in historic districts. I know, Margot, you've raised a couple concerns about this or questions, and then Claire, you had requested this topic, but I have some, stuff I can talk about it, but I thought I'd start off, Claire, if you wanted to kind of talk about and kick off the discussion, why you wanted to add it to the agenda and what you want to talk about.
Absolutely. Just now realizing that my sweater is the same color as my wall, so hopefully I don't disappear for you guys. But I had asked that we talk about this. I'd like to even maybe broaden this subject out a little bit more, and just kind of talk about our historic districts, guidelines, and resource guidelines in general, but, you know, specific to the non-contributing building piece, you know, this came up as we were chatting about that newish construction building over on Nicollet. We were talking about the addition of conduit for air conditioning, I think was the reason for it. And just talking about like how much purview should we have over those types of design elements for a building that isn't contributing to the historic district, and what that looks like, and how we can be thoughtful about that in the future writing of guidelines that allows our applicants some flexibility in that space. And you know, I'm the first to admit, like, on the legality piece of some of the work that we do, and like the policy stuff, I'm not an expert by any means. That's why I'm so thankful that we have Barbara Howard on this commission to lend that expertise. And so I think that one of the big things, I mentioned this on Tuesday, that I'd like the rest of the commission to provide their thoughts and feedback on. But we have a lot of these things that come before us that, you know, it's not like we as the commissioners are constantly reading the design guidelines or how a new construction building might be impacted by design guidelines and things like that. These come before us because of applications, and then things are highlighted that maybe we as commissioners would wish that they weren't that way, so that we could rule and be more flexible to allow our applicants to make changes to their buildings when appropriate. But when they fly directly in the face of our guidelines, it's difficult for us to do, right, to justify. And, you know, I think we've done a really great job of trying to have those nuanced conversations that come down to decisions that are defensible, and that we feel that we talked through it fully. But what I would like to see happen is that we don't just drop the ball there and then, you know, wait for the next one to come up for us to have those conversations all over again. I'd like to look back and think about, all right, that was a tougher decision to do that for the applicant because of the fact that this thing was written into the design guidelines, or like a non-contributing building, it still needs to meet all these criterias, even though maybe we feel like that might be more rigid than it needs to be. Maybe we feel things have changed, or we want to have more flexibility, you know. So what I was wanting, and I don't know what this logistically looks like, that's why I want to have this conversation, is for us to be able to flag those items and come back to them and discuss it and say, you know, like, well, on that particular area, that historic district, maybe it makes sense for us to review the impact on non-contributing buildings to the design guidelines, and maybe we tweak those. And what does that look like? How does that process get requested? I think that's a question for Andrea. And then I would ask that the commissioners weigh in on their thoughts and feelings about doing that, and whether or not that seems like a worthy thing for us to be thinking about and doing. So I think that's kind of the intro. I'll start with Andrea, and I'll let you kind of take it from there.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. And I'll give a little blurb here. So, you know, in a historic district, and that is what gets codified and written into resolution, the boundaries. Everything within those boundaries is within our purview. And that's what the authority we're granted under the state enabling legislation. And there happens to be, you know, this further label, I guess, you know, properties can be identified. They are identified as contributing and non-contributing. And more in the last 20 years, we've been very diligent to make sure that happens in historic districts versus some that were designated in the 70s, which didn't generally have that. But this determination dictates the level of review that's going to be applied. You know, and why contributing properties, you know, generally enjoy full protection, you know, changes to non-contributing property are generally approved if they're compatible with the character of the district, and that leaves a lot of room for interpretation and what is compatible. And that's something I know us as a staff struggle with a lot, especially when we get these requests on non-contributing buildings, but changes that wouldn't meet the guidelines if it was built today under the new construction standards. You know, and there's I mean, I think as a general rule, you know, contributing properties help, they make the historic district historic. That's where the significance lies, whether it's, you know, under criterion 1 or, you know, through 7. But keeping in mind that historic buildings can become non-contributing buildings if major alterations have taken place or do take place that basically sort of kick the building to the other side of the spectrum or kick the property to the other side of the spectrum. And it can be as small as something as siding. If the, you know, inappropriate siding or inconsistent siding is put on that changes it enough, it can put it to a non-contributing resource. But the opposite can happen too. You can have, I mean, this happens, I've seen this happen many times in commercial districts where you will have a building that has a skin on it, or a building that has had, you know, inappropriate, you know, casement windows when they were double hung, and other changes that somebody comes along and out of the goodness of their heart or their pocketbook go in and change it and kind of do a restoration, but kind of do a rehab and bring the building back to falling in line if the guts of it are still fall kind of within that period of significance. And I've seen this happen a lot, and the building then becomes a contributing building. I don't see this happen too much in Minneapolis, but I know it's definitely has to have happened before. You know, but we have as the commission has the responsibility to designate and, you know, maintain the inventory of resources and, you know, to make decisions on contributing and non-contributing buildings. And I think for the guidelines, there have been a couple things we've tried on for size, with some guidelines that are sitting in my lap for way too long, that I had hoped to bring through sooner, but just life has happened and a bunch of other things have happened. I've actually I had John write them with contributing and non-contributing. Has been something I've seen guidelines do that I think helps. But then it's like, if they've come out, we haven't brought them to you yet. You know, there's a lot of similarities I've noticed between them. And whereas it's very hard to write a guideline or to codify in a way how to treat a non-contributing building, because they can be so different. You know, let's say you have I'm just going to give Lyndhurst Margot because that's very recent. You know, I think our period of significance ends there in 1937. And then we have one non-contributing property as a property that was built in 1984. You know, and how do we, you know, treat that preventing on? Most of the time, you know, especially when it comes to the administrative level, we're extremely flexible with window replacements, siding replacements, even demolitions. We're pretty flexible with that. And I think it's when it comes to changes that wouldn't be compatible with the rest of the district. And I confess, it's a fine line to walk, and finding that flexibility is tough. I had one in the Greek letter chapter house a few years ago that wasn't planning major changes, but it was a non-contributing building. And we approved quite a bit of it. It actually went on consent, but we approved quite a bit of it, you know, including window replacements, including a storefront replacement, but for a contributing building would not have been approved. But there are certain things we drew the line on that just would have went too far in terms of being incompatible with the district. And I think there was some funny thing planned off the roof for the back, and then some other funny thing being planned off the side, which, you know, it is tough for us to draw those lines. And so I think if I'm hearing you, Claire, correct me if I'm wrong, is somehow trying to have more clear guidance on how to treat non-contributing buildings. That sound accurate? Did we lose Claire? I think we lost Claire. She'll come back.
So Andrea, Margot here.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned me and the district that I live in, it seems like to me that there should be some kind of overall statements like the one you made. I mean, if it's non-contributing, we probably don't want it to be any worse than it already is, and whatever that means in the context of a particular project. I think it would be helpful to have some kind of generic principles like that could be used. The example that you gave, I mean, this house, it could hardly be more non-contributing, except that it's back away from the street, just like the rest of our houses. And if they wanted to do something different to it that would bring it up to the street, seems to me that might be a problem. If they wanted to get rid of that garage that faces front when none of the others do and wanted to put it on the back, I would think that would be a good thing. But there must be some way of identifying, at least at a high level, what it is we're concerned about, looking at whatever district or building or whatever it is, to try to articulate what it is that would not be approved in a generic way, so that the commission has something to focus on when those issues come up.
Okay. What do others think about? I don't know how to do that yet or how that would look. But Barb, yes, I was hoping.
Well, since I was name checked too, I think first thing I should try to correct the matter. I really don't like all the regulations. If you had just a regular conversation with me, if we're sitting at a bar and I have a beer in front of me or something like that, you're going to find out that I'm really not a really strict preservationist at heart, and that's why I talk about myself as being a preservationist with futuristic tendencies. I love seeing the layers of history in all of our districts. That's why I got into preservation out of architecture. I think that conversation that we had related to the building that Claire mentioned, it was maddening to me, because all we could do based on what we had in our guidelines was to treat it as though it was a brand new design. And I sometimes feel like we do far too much design on new buildings in districts, as opposed to providing inspiration for design and things like that. So I don't like trying to tighten down on architects when they're doing design unless it's really, really crazy. Or in the cases we have to, through our quasi-judicial processes, making sure it actually meets the standards that we have, the design guidelines that we have. I'm really interested to see the guidelines that you have, Andrea, that John prepared, that might have something for non-contributing buildings. I think that will be helpful. With the idea of it being compatible within the district as a whole. I found it hard to try to apply the standard of, okay, I'm going to treat this like a brand new building. Would we have allowed this to happen? I don't know that we would have looked at the detail that much if that had been proposed in the original design. I don't know. But I'm interested to see what you have. I think that if we can have design guidelines that talk about non-contributing buildings, it'll give us those talking points that Margot wants, and I think all of us want. Were you going to say, Madeline?
Yeah, I guess, Barbara, what you're saying made me kind of think about the Minnesota Conservation Code, which is what architects use often when looking at historic buildings, that they're adapting or changing in some way. And the way it's broken up is by level of alteration to an existing building. And I guess I'm almost wondering if something along that lines would be useful, because in that case, it measures compliance based off of like how much alteration you're doing. So if you're altering a building more substantially, you need to bring it more in compliance with code. And I guess I'm wondering, for example, this one where it was they're just replacing this one system and they just need to put the conduit. It's a fairly minor change to the building as a whole. And so I could see why they were trying to get like the most financially viable solution to their very immediate problem without wholesale alteration of the building. And if for non-contributing buildings, if it might make sense to have sort of a slightly separate look at like wholesale infill versus alteration to existing, and maybe even breaking it down into like significant alteration to existing versus minor alteration to existing, because that's where I really got stuck on that conduit, was like the more compliant answer for our guidelines would have required significantly more alteration to the building than their response. And I guess that's kind of how I'm seeing it, almost in line with the conservation code, where they don't, if you're updating, I don't know, the carpet in one area of your building, they don't make you make all the doors on that floor compliant. It's just the ones leading to that section. Like, they don't make you go into other parts of a building to bring other things up to compliance if you're just altering a small area. So if there would be some way to put in almost like levels of changes to non-contributing buildings, I feel like maybe, I don't know, food for thought, and a direction that it could go to break it up versus, we have one guideline that is broken up like infill for non-contributing, but breaking it up for like infill versus alteration, because I guess for me that's what made that one very different. I'm trying to think of other examples. We had a couple non-contributing garages that had alterations while I've been on the commission. One wanted to re-side in a non-compliant material, but again, they weren't. Yeah, do you remember that? I mean, yeah, they weren't wholesale changing it. They were keeping basically the garage. They were just re-siding it, and it was already non-compliant and non-contributing. And so, I get, yeah, if there's some way to designate like alteration versus infill, might be useful. So,
sure.
There you go.
What were you gonna say, Ian?
I'll be quick. I know we're at a next item soon. The thing that I was on the Charter Commission before this commission, and we would do a lot of subcommittees, and I know we have the power to do that here. And we worked on a plain language revision of the whole charter, and we worked in subcommittees on specific topics. I think that when we come to something where we see a building that has a really long period of significance, like Tuesday, it'd be great to have like a subcommittee that we could kick that back to, like Claire said, and come back with a recommendation, say, let's revise this. And I feel like we could do the same thing if we see egregious things in guidelines too, that we over and over, it's like, oh, this is a real stumbling block. And if we could tweak the language, that would be so much helpful. And I think we, have the, we would need people to volunteer to be on that. It'd have to be a small committee, but I think that's a thing we could work on. So we have that's in our universe of things we can do, and then we're not just reacting, we're being more proactive and still doing our job.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's a sticky issue, and one like I said, we struggle with a lot too, and it's just kind of some of my thoughts behind this one, design guidelines, and the reason we chose it, well, I chose it, I'll be honest, for this district is because the line between contributing and non-contributing, just to be completely transparent, is Dinkytown. Between contributing and non-contributing is very close there. And there's a lot of changes to buildings, and that it's a tough line to walk, as well as the tough line based on the study that was done and then what ultimately came out of council. With the period of significance. So we were kind of between a rock and a hard place of trying to put these into design guidelines. And I'll just be completely honest, we did a complete, after bringing them through you and some other comments, we did a complete rewrite of them. And they're in my lap right now, so this is my fault. But it might be an interesting thing when we bring it through for comment, when we have that ready to go, to see what you guys think of this kind of, I'm gonna say experiment. I've seen it in other guidelines in other parts of the country, to see how it turned out, and does it work, and does it give you enough guidance to be able to make a decision on a non-contributing building, because there's a number of them in that district, and then there's also a number of buildings in that district that if you change a couple things, you could maybe make it a contributing building, as I said. So thank you for your comments on that. Sorry, I'm going to continue to move forward, because this is, Bree has graciously been sitting through on this, and want to respect her time for being here too. So moving on, cultural districts. This was a topic from Ian Stady, who wanted to talk about, I kind of made it into cultural districts. I think these are interrelated. But, supporting the efforts on the Thrive, what is that, Thrive 38, 38 Thrive, the efforts happening around 38th in Chicago. And Bree is very intimately involved in what's happening. Bree is in our long range planning group, and I'll give her and let her introduce herself here in a moment. But I wanted to just give a quick overview of that, and then I can let Bree kind of take over here, and she and I can talk. You've heard about cultural districts, and the 38th in Chicago area is a cultural district. This did get passed into ordinance. And Bree, if I speak out of turn here, please correct me. What's happening at 38th in Chicago, I want to just make a note to be careful and proceed with caution. And I know there's talks of designating it, there's talks of memorials, there's a lot of talks and recognizing what happened there almost a year ago. And, you know, and to acknowledge that the city, you know, city leadership is being as careful as they can with this area, and the residents that live there and the group that is looking after this area have a lot being asked of them around this intersection and this event where a lot of things have been kicked off, and to try to treat it as sensibly as possible. And I know that there's talk of designation, and my feeling is I don't want the city to put something on this group or this area without it really coming from them, or without them having the most understanding as to what's being asked, because we do have a limited toolbox, and it's a lot of architectural review, and I don't know if that's has been fully communicated or is fully understandable yet. And I'm really hoping that some of the meetings that will happen out of this National Trust Grant community engagement, you know, this topic will come up, and will be a meeting held in that area to get the perspective of the residents and that group to say what they're thinking and what they want, and to have whatever happens there more organically than the city coming in and sort of saying, hey, we want to do this. I think let's hear from them first, and kind of take a slower approach, and just, yeah, that there is being a lot asked of them right now, and being respectful of that. But also the fact that this is a cultural district, you will be seeing cultural districts. Bree is more familiar with them, and Bree probably gonna laugh at me as everything I'm saying, but let me just introduce her. This is Brianne Golding. She is in her long range planning group. She has been a fantastic resource and has been involved heavily with the cultural districts and the initiative to that. So Bree, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of explain your work on the cultural districts lately, if that's all right.
Yes. Thank you, Annie. So yeah, my name is Bree Golding. I've been in the city for almost 3.5 years. I came here from in New York City, so it's been a little bit coming to Minneapolis, and I came for the comp plan, working with that. And so just to give you a little history, because the 38th Street Thrive project, which I was the project manager for, kind of overlaps and weaves into the cultural district, and they kind of happen at the same time. So forgive me if I overlap on something, just, you know, ask questions if need be. But how I actually got involved in all of this is through the 38th Street project. So back in February of 2019, CPV Jenkins decided that she wanted to pick up the planning efforts that former councilwoman was doing, and we kind of kicked off started planning project uh, uh, in this district, which I know was being planned behind the scenes.
We're losing you,
You know,
quite a bit, Bree. I'm so sorry. I don't know if there's much you can do. You're breaking it down.
38th Street. And so to Bloom on 38. So the the dead center of this survey in Chicago. Go figure. So I would say the cultural district with the mayor, Councilmember Jenkins, I believe, well, I believe, let's see.
Is this better?
Sorry, yeah, you seem to be cutting out
You guys-
quite a bit. I'm seeing if you
Hello?
can see my chat message. We'll see if she can, we'll see if she can come back on or calls in. Let's see. Virtual meetings. Thanks, Ian. All right, hold tight a sec, folks. Let's see if she can call in here. My plan is let's wait another minute or so. Let's see if we can get her on. And if not, maybe we can move on. And then if she can connect, we can divert to her item for a sec here. Let's see. Too bad she has the great she has a good background on the cultural logistics, which I don't have as well as she does.
While we were waiting, I found the 38th Street Thrive strategic plan. So I put a link to that in the chat.
Cool, thank you.
I love that it talks about preservation in a couple different places.
Sorry about that. I have no idea. So I'm gonna keep my camera off because I think it's just taking too much power. But just start off where I left off. It's doing it again.
Say it again, Bree.
I'm just gonna call in.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm just gonna.
Yeah, if you leave and then just call in with your whichever phone, it should link you up, and then it'll ask us if you want to join, and then we can bring you right in. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Whew.
Thank you.
Gotta love technology. So just to talk a little bit about 38th, and then I can talk about the cultural districts. So with 38th, the planning process has been going on for 2 years with the community, and it was a very community based planning, because the council member was very adamant about making sure this was an equitable planning engagement. So the community itself actually pretty much wrote every section. I just put it, well, they came up with the concept for everything you see in the plan, and I put it together. So around, I would say, we were actually planning our last community event before trying to bring this to council for June 4th of 2020. So a week before we were going to bring this to the larger community, and we had flyers out and everything of that nature. George Floyd was murdered at the intersection, and that just changed everything. It changed everything. I would say the good thing about it is that the community leaders through the planning process knew each other, where before they didn't really work with each other like that. So I think that actually contributed to how strong of a community you saw when you saw all the activism taking place after his murder. And so pretty much that summer, we just paused working on a plan just to deal with everything that was going on at the intersection. And I remember having a conversation, I think in September or October, with Jenkins about, if you want this plan to happen, it needs to get adopted before the trial. And then that was the end goal of picking this thing back up, getting one more like public review, community review of this plan, and getting it pressed through, because she really wanted this to be a part of the cultural district. So that's kind of 38th Street stuff, and that the Thrive Plan was adopted. It was adopted, I should know because I brought it through, August of 2020. And so I had a conversation with Jenkins late summer about, we need to like really push this through and get this done. So we were able to do it a little bit. So let's see, as far as cultural districts, I kind of got involved late 2019. So by then, the cultural districts were already announced by the mayor. And at that time, there were 6 of them, which was West Broadway, Central, Riverside, Franklin, Lake, and 38th. When it actually got adopted was Lori was added to it. So there's technically 7 of them right now. And the basis behind it is trying to preserve cultural heritage and like economic vitality of these areas. So pretty much the thought behind it is, how can we prevent displacement? How can we advance racial equity? How can we create these areas to be some type of destination? And that looks different for each district. For example, Lake Street wants to be like this, well-known destination, or at least when you come into Minneapolis, of Lake Street, where 38th wants to be more of like a destination for the local residents here, or metro residents. So it really differs based off of the districts. And right now, the program is honestly still being shaped. So what it is right now is that a lot of city resources that already existed have consolidated, and the individuals that manage these programs are working together to prioritize services and programs in projects in cultural districts. So that's kind of where that is right now. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions?
Hey,
or
Bree,
if you want me to talk about some stuff. Oh, sorry.
No, that's all right. Thanks for presenting Bree, I've been curious about what the plan is with the cultural districts going forward, and I would just encourage you. You may already be aware of the Main Street program. They have a sub program that's Urban Maine that I think could be really helpful in Minneapolis and provide more connections and resources and things like that, and could easily fit in with the cultural district program. So if it is truly still being formed, like it sounds like it is, I'd encourage you to look at that, because I went to a Main Street conference with a CLG grant, with a grant because of our commission status. And the Urban Maine folks were just amazing, the work that's being done in some of the cities around the country. There's some good programs in DC and I want to say there was some in Georgia. And it might be a good way to tie in preservation into all of this. And I just wanted to mention, I posted the link to your 38th Thrive strategic plan in the chat. I appreciate seeing mention of preservation in that, and I think it's great that we're looking at preservation as a positive part of community revitalization. You heard us talking about the awards program earlier. I'm sure, we're often seen as just being the board that says no, and it's great to see preservation being mentioned in things that are about revitalization and moving things forward. So thank you.
Oh, I mean, that honestly came from the community, so thank them. I would say Council Vice President Jenkins is kind of historian in her own way, and a person that wrote the history section that lives in that neighborhood. She is a co-founder of the African American Heritage Museum and Gallery. So there's a lot of historians in the neighborhood, in that community. So
we're everywhere, aren't we? And Annie, I wanted to thank you as you were introducing this topic about 38th in Chicago. I know there's been lots of discussion about possible designation, and I've tried really, really hard to stay out of those discussions, but I agree with you completely. This has to be coming from the community. And I think it's important that that comes from the community when they're ready. And I think that we need to, as a commission, start thinking a little differently about what designation and preservation might mean for a location like that. And can that be accomplished through things like a cultural district instead of designation as we typically look at designation? I think that preservation is changing. I already told you I'm a preservationist with futuristic tendencies, and I think that's more so today and after George Floyd's murder than it was beforehand. So I know I'm looking at preservation differently. So I appreciate that the city is ready to help the community and to work with the community as they're ready to look at things like that.
Yeah, you brought up a really good point, Barbara. Just to let everyone know, you probably have an idea of it, but everything that's going on at the intersection of 38th and Chicago is so tense and so complex. It's like a reality TV show, to be honest, in my mind. But right now they have so many different decisions to make as a community, with so many different influencers trying to help in a way. And this could be local folks or folks from Europe, in Canada, from out of the country, want a piece of this intersection in a way. It's a piece of history. It really is. And everybody wants to be a part of it. But for the folks who have to listen to all the stuff that's happening there every single day, it's kind of like, as somebody described, living in the middle of Disneyland, because there's always tourists and stuff around, when that was never that community. They never had to experience that before. People didn't even know really
38th Street and 38th in Chicago. So there's a lot of different dynamics as far as you have folks that have lived there their entire life, you know, live in their grandparents' home, you know, been there 60 years. You have folks that just moved in probably 2 years ago. You have the gangs, you have the businesses, you have the religious institutions. And so there is, you have Sabathani, you have the spokesman recorder. So it's really this unique community that is honestly trying to figure this out together. They all have a vision of where they want 38th Street to be and how it should feel and how it should look. That's a collective view, but they all differ on how to get there, which has been the hard part. And so I think bringing historic preservation in right now, honestly, it would just get lost, to be honest, at this point. I think in a couple of years, once some things get figured out, because, you know, right now they're looking at safety, they're looking at the sentencing, because we think, oh, just because he got convicted, if he gets 5 years, that's not justice to them. So it's still raw. The community is still raw with emotion, with pain, with confusion, with anxiety. Yeah, because they don't know what the future will be like, but they know it's going to be something. And so that's my 2 cents of what I would like to, you know, share with you guys on what's kind of happening out there. Yeah.
I really appreciate your perspective. Thank you, Bree.
Yeah, thank you. I would say, let's move on. And if there's any further questions on kind of what Bree said, feel free to, you know, reach out to me, and I can, you know, reach out to Bree or put you directly in touch with Bree about it. But let's do that. Thank you so much, Bree, for calling in and for attending. I appreciate it.
No problem. I gotta love technology. Been on the call for about an hour and a half, and then it's just like, nope.
I know. So we've next got on, and obviously during any of this, anyone please get up and use the beauty of virtual meetings, and you don't have to have your camera and get a snack, use the restroom, whatever. Don't, you know, if we call on you and you're there, not there, we understand. Deconstruction ordinance. I've got Ethan and Madeline, because both of you had brought this up as a requested topic. So I will let both of you kick off the discussion.
Thanks, Andrea. Ethan, if you don't mind, I guess I'll start and I'll pass it off to you. So I had requested this topic because I'm now trying to remember how many months ago, but at our last retreat, we discussed a few task forces, and one of them was Deconstruction Ordinance. And so I think I did actually technically bring into life the task force on Deconstruction Ordinance, and then it promptly went nowhere. I attended a webinar about Deconstruction Ordinances, which is maybe also what Ethan is inspired by, because it was a Rethos webinar, and I guess it brought it back up to the top of my mind, and it provided some interesting information that we didn't have the last time we talked about this, which is why I wanted to kind of circle back on it. Which was when we talked before, I did not realize that Hennepin County was offering deconstruction grants, which I think is really exciting, and potentially makes them a partner for the city, should the city be willing to look at a deconstruction ordinance. And so just for a little information for anybody else who also didn't know this was a thing, Hennepin County is offering grants to developers or homeowners that are for residential properties built prior to 1970, where the area of demo or renovation is 500 square feet or larger. And then they send out a Hennepin County staff member to do a pre-demolition inspection of the site. They help you figure out which items are going to be reused and deconstructed and where they're going to go. They give a whole list of different people who can do and take different deconstruction materials, which I just thought was, I guess, for me, a really interesting and good development. And the fact that they're $5,000 grants that they're giving homeowners who want to do this made me wonder if this provided an opportunity for the city to potentially partner with the county, since they have a whole group of people looking specifically at deconstruction for the county, who have in their discussion, they discussed the ordinances, which I think we talked before about the one in Portland, and how they used these ordinances to kind of help with their grant making process. And so the one in Portland is for structures before 1940. The one in Hennepin County is 1970. So they went with a slightly different date there. And then also, I think this has gone into effect since we last talked, is the city of Palo Alto, which is also one that the Hennepin County had looked into, has gone with a zero waste deconstruction ordinance, where all demolition and construction projects, I believe, are being required to do deconstruction. They've just completely stopped demolition as like an allowable thing. Everything has to be maximized for the reuse and recycling, which is certainly.
What city was that?
It's Palo Alto. Here, I can put I'll put it in the chat here. So I thought that that this is continuing to progress as a topic, and so I wanted to bring it kind of back onto the radar, because I know I was kind of a driving force with it, and then I a lot of things have happened in the last year, so it kind of just sat on the wayside here. I will also link in here the guide on deconstruction. The county references, I guess. And this guide is a tool for local governments and economic development practitioners, and it's supposed to help local governments walk through the idea of whether or not a deconstruction ordinance is a good idea for their government. So it seems like kind of exactly what we need. So I guess that's in brief where this is coming from. And Ethan, I'm wondering if you have any additional thoughts on why you also pulled it to the top of the list here.
No, I think you said a lot of great things that I was kind of trying to hit on too, because since I'm new to the commission, I wanted to hear a little bit more about the context that deconstruction has been talked about in the past. So it's great to hear that it has been talked about, and that there was at least an initiative last year, it sounds like, led by you to start a task force to think about it. Totally understandable in the past year how that might have fallen to the wayside a little bit. But I just am curious to hear some of the thoughts, because I know that preservation has been kind of a interesting little side part of the deconstruction movement. And I know in the past few years that deconstruction has gained a lot of traction and momentum in the sustainability community. But obviously we deal with old buildings and historic buildings all the time. And there is, I believe, certain opportunities in historic building deconstruction that would be really, and then deconstruction in general, that would be really beneficial for the preservation community, and would be absolutely interested in talking about, or like being on some sort of committee or task force for deconstruction ordinances in the future. Yeah, I was going to mention too, obviously Portland. There's a few other cities that have enacted versions of deconstruction ordinances. Milwaukee's, I don't think, is very successful, or hasn't been used as much. And I think Pittsburgh recently enacted one for city-owned buildings. that city-owned buildings have to be deconstructed. I also think there's a lot of opportunity too in community building and the job creation, the fact that they're low training. There's not much training required for the jobs that would be created for deconstruction. Learning about historic building practices through deconstruction, in-kind replacement for buildings, all the benefits of that I think would be great for something like that. But I'm interested to hear what other people think about this in the context of preservation.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to remember who else had, was it maybe Kimberly or Barbara? There were a few other people who were tentatively on this task force that went nowhere.
Yeah, well, I don't think I was officially on the task force. I think I said that I would review stuff once you guys had stuff, because I just haven't had, I knew I wasn't going to have time, but I'm wholeheartedly behind some sort of a deconstruction ordinance of some sort, both as a component of the preservation side of things and as job creation. And that job creation can also fit into diversity and inclusion goals of the city. I haven't had a chance to do additional research besides the ones that you guys have already mentioned, but I'm wholeheartedly behind us looking at whether something is possible.
Andrea, I guess I have a question for you kind of around this, because I know we talked about before potentially coming up with some draft language and, you know, the difficulty then of trying to get city buy-in. But I guess what I'm wondering with this, because I really like what I like about the Hennepin County is that they're doing an incentive, right? And we really struggle with incentives for preservation. So the idea that clearly demolition isn't, or deconstruction isn't really preservation, but they're doing it for you know, redevelopments as well as full demolitions of buildings, which I really like that it's allowing for both. I'm wondering if there would be an outlet on our newly designed website to promote something like these deconstruction grants. When people, for example, come before us with a demolition request, I realize we can't force them to do it, but like provide the information that it exists.
Like through to like promote Hennepin County's deconstruction.
Yeah, until we can get something of our own together, if there would be some place on our website that we could promote their program. I mean, $5,000 isn't a ton of money, but for a homeowner renovating their house, $5,000 is not nothing. And so I guess I'd love to be a link for resources as well. Speaking of, you know, community engagement and everything.
You know, yeah, one side of me is like, oh yeah, I could totally do that. And then the other more ask permission side of me is like, I don't know, I have to check with several people on that if we could do that. I would think so. I mean, we recommend a number of things on our site, and you know, as long, you know, at this point it's not something that we're, you know, there's no ordinance or anything like that, but to direct folks, I don't know where it would be at this point. But I'd have to look into it.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering if like when people pulled the application thing for doing a demolition, it'd be really nice if
on our page. Because I can't find them all right now.
Yeah, I mean, they have the resources page for property owners. That would be a really good place. But yeah, I guess I was thinking like when people pull the you know, like there's the certificate of appropriateness, and then there's the section on like demolitions when they're doing that. If there would be some subtle way to like, and if you're doing large scale changes, here, look at this deconstruction grant program.
Sure.
Yeah, I would love to get an ordinance in place, but in the meantime, since we don't have any incentives we can provide, I'd love to like make people aware of an incentive that already exists that they probably just don't even realize is there. I feel like not that many people go searching for grants on the county website, at least not regular homeowners.
I feel like it might be somewhere already on our website, not under our section, but I don't know. I'd have to go looking. Or at least it was on the old website. I feel like somebody found that, but I could be completely wrong on that. But no, thank you. Yeah, and you know, and by all means, you know, as you see fit or have time, which never seems to be enough to, you know, have your or have a task force to think about what this might look like, and then, you know, bringing me in on eventually, and I can tell you kind of how to run it, bring it to the regulatory system. There's, you know, a whole process of getting it introduced and then doing the subject matter and then this and then council, and then it gets referred to staff, and it's all very much a formal process that I confess I'm still learning and changing the ordinance just with this most recent ordinance change that came through before you a few weeks ago. So just let me know. Anything else discussion wise on that topic on deconstruction ordinance?
I will add, I think I forgot to mention this earlier too, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency had a working group about sustainable building techniques, and they also recommended deconstruction ordinances as part of their recommendations. So it's another Minnesota group that's having this type of discussion here, and would be an interesting group to engage with.
Cool.
I do wonder, with the county being so supportive of deconstruction and the state as a whole being supportive of deconstruction, if there would be any funding available for the city to do part of the process for an ordinance change. I guess I'm wondering if they would offer local governments funding for it. I don't think they are at this point, but it might be, I don't know, worth contemplating. If the state seriously wants local governments to put this in place, and if the county does, I would think they might be open to partnership on things. But I don't even know how one would start that conversation.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know either, to be honest. All right. With that, I will move on. And we are with Claire's topic on the potential diversity. Claire, please me, I think I got this right, and I feel sheepish for not knowing the acronym perfectly, but diversity, equity, and inclusion options for HPC. It's kind of a continuation from our last retreat in August of last year.
Yeah, that's right. Can you guys hear me? I can't tell. My internet's kind of cutting in and out today, so.
Doing good so far.
All right, cool. Sounds good. Yeah, so, you know, like in that same conversation vein, we talked about the deconstruction ordinance, and then we also talked about the diversity and equity and inclusion issues that relate to our work, and how we can better serve broader communities within the city of Minneapolis, and how our policies and programs can do that. And that, you know, I've been wanting to take the lead on that, and I've got a long list. I've got a lot of notes. I've had a lot of conversations over the course of the last year. I just haven't gotten myself organized to present anything to the commission. And I think that what I don't want to spend a bunch of time talking about it today, because I feel like we've already had this conversation. We know, generally speaking, where we're landing on it. But what I am looking for, and I want to confirm that this is okay logistically first, you know, like Commissioner Stady had talked about this idea, this concept that maybe we could move from a maybe start task force or subcommittees or something of that nature that provide the commission some additional ability to be useful. Like what I really want to see happen, you know, maybe on the deconstruction side, definitely on the diversity and equity issue side, is that we in the commission can be the leaders on that, and then provide our feedback, guidance, advice to staff, because staff already has enough other irons in the fire. And part of the purpose of us being on this commission is that we volunteer our time and our expertise. I feel like this is an area where we could be useful in exactly that space. So with that, what I was hoping I could do, I'm going to ask Andrea, I'm going to ask you to clarify two things for me. And I don't know if you'll know this off the top of your head, or if this is something that you'll need to seek additional information from the city's council. But, you know, if we do a task force, what impact does that have on open meeting laws? Like a subcommittee, whatever you want to call it. And so then therefore, is there a maximum number of participants that could take part in this? And my vision here is that I'm kind of thinking like 2 or 3 people, because I know we want to keep it from, I'm guessing we want to keep it from a full quorum so that we don't have to like notice and stuff like that. But let's say it's a task force of 3 people. And then my idea being that us 3 would meet regularly with homework and assignments, and then we would come back to the full commission on an agenda item with recommendations. Let that be new policy opportunities, you know, like Barbara's brought up the Urban Main Street program a couple of times, and I've done a bunch of reading on that, and that's a phenomenal way for us to really broaden our reach in preservation policy. So it's stuff like that. What I would like to do, instead of getting so deep into these conversations about how our current policy, our current tools are not reaching communities of color, instead just broadening our tools, get more tools. You know, we need more tools, not less. And so continuing with the tools we have, using them the way that they make sense to continue to use them, but then let's think about creating new ones. So like, I don't want to ramble on too long. So Andrea, from your perspective, from your understanding, like, can we do a task force? What does that look like? You know, how many people can be on that? And then secondarily, I'm looking for volunteers for said task force. I know Ian Stady is very interested in this topic, and I'm happy to be a part, have him a part of that. And then, you know, I'm thinking probably at least one more. It looks like Andrea had to hop off quick, but yeah, I guess, are there any other commissioners that have any thoughts or ideas on this?
Claire, I'm thinking back to when I think when I birthed the task force on deconstruction, I also did start the one on, because I think I had to make like an announcement at a meeting or something. I think I did start the diversity, equity, and inclusion task force. So I think there is a task force, and I think we said you were heading it. So I think you can start holding meetings whenever you want to.
So yes, and I do know that. I think that where I didn't fully close the loop on that is getting commissioners, and I'm not clear on how many commissioners we can have. I don't want to get into trouble for open meetings, you know, and I don't want to, I would really like it if our task force meetings could occur without public broadcast.
Yeah, I think you can have up to 4 commissioners.
Okay.
Because you have to just like one less than quorum or something.
That's
like
what
that.
I was thinking. Yeah. And so I wanted to seek clarity on that. And then if it's 4, 4 would be good. I think more the better, you know. Then I'm looking for volunteers to come join me on it.
Yeah, I'm checking here.
It looks like Allie just noted that she's interested. So we're up to 3 total.
Yeah,
we got
I think you would be safe at 4. So
yeah, I wanted to give a little historic background. We did have a subcommittee or task force on historic districts, and I was on that, and I think it was 4 of us. You know, we were kind of like feeling out what would be historic districts. That was quite a while ago, but yeah, I think that's a precedent I can remember.
Yeah, I think that's what we discussed last summer as well, and this is one that I'm interested in as well. But if you have other people who are on the committee, much like I've said to Madeline with the deconstruction, I can always just, you know, contribute on the side or review things like that. My time is pretty pressed, but I'm passionate about the DEI issues.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, so was there 2 different task force, or was this kind of the same line of thinking of like somewhat like a different group that would focus specifically on DEI versus a group that would focus specifically on deconstruction?
Right. Yes. Exactly. We started 2 task forces, but like at the same meeting. So it was, in our minds, they're linked, but they're 2 separate task forces.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do you
go
want
ahead,
to
Andrea.
My response on your question about, you know, open meeting and stuff. So we're kind of governed by what the bylaws allow us to do. And when I had looked into this before, I think it was the bylaws allow kind of like a special committee. And I think it was around 3, I can double check that. And that's under quorum for this. And essentially it's kind of like you can meet as needed. Staff wouldn't necessarily be coordinating or involved. And then, as you said, you would then come to us with a recommendation as to staff, and then we would discuss it. You know, we'd add it to an agenda. I'd have to check with the clerks the proper way to add that to the agenda if we have to introduce it or something like that under like new business. And then we would, you know, put it on the agenda and discuss. So that's pretty clear in my mind, because I remember I looked over the bylaws multiple times to get some feedback on that. So that's what I can say.
Awesome. That's exactly what I needed. So, and then it looks like I got Ellie, Ian, and myself on this. And then if we can have another, I don't know if we can have 4 or not, but if anybody else is interested, even if you're like Commissioner Howard said, if you want to have some be a sounding board, just let me know. You can just email me directly and let me know that. And so then from a logistical perspective, before I start kicking all these conversations off, I really just want to have a full understanding of how this logistically works. And so, and then hopefully maybe this can inform future other, like, you know, task force or sub focus groups that we can have in the commission, and we can all be, you know, become really useful in our backgrounds and understanding. And so then, okay, so if the task force gets together and we have a policy that we want to recommend, we say, you know, like for instance, we would like to explore adding a urban Main Street program to the city of Minneapolis. So how does that work? Would it be that we would bring it in as an agenda item and then direct staff to do a study on that? Or how would that work, Andrea? Just for I'm sorry if that's a stupid question. I just really don't understand how that would work.
Not stupid. Rephrase it one more time though.
So let's say that the task force decided that we would like to explore adding a policy of like an urban Main Street program. And so we would bring that to the commission, see if the commissioners agree that that's the right thing to do. And then the next step there would be, I assume, directing staff to start putting that policy together, the infrastructure of the policy.
That's a darn good question, and I don't know.
Okay.
I'm going to be more comfortable in saying I don't know.
Yeah.
I have to look into it to see kind of what the next steps would be, because I know there have been things like this before. And in fact, like Ian, I think you sat on some committees a while ago that you remember one of these meetings. I remember you mentioning it, and then had come to with recommendations, and then staff had gone forward with that. But I'd have to look into that, because then it depends on like, how does it fit in? Is it an ordinance change, or is it a program change, or where do we fit it in to the fund structure of bureaucracy? So that's what I gotta think about.
Okay, great. Yeah, so if you could have as a takeaway to maybe look into that and let me know. I would like to know that before we really get into the meat and potatoes of this stuff, because if we start finding policies or programmatic changes that make a lot of sense to us, I'd like to bring them to the council or to the commission as quickly as possible and do that. But those are important logistical pieces that will inform the framework of what we recommend as a task force. So I think that would be useful to know. And then, so my intent, I was going to have this written as a formal proposal, and I just never got myself together to do that. But so just verbally, my intent here would be, I will call task force meetings with the members, and we'll dig into some of this stuff. I've got a long list of different policies and programs that other communities have, other HPCs have implemented. And so I'd like to kind of like just put our task force in charge of digging into those, how those work, and what's the benefits, what's the risk, what's the where are they maybe not as beneficial. And then hopefully we can come together with some actual tools that will help us be more nimble in help working with those communities, communities of color and underrepresented communities, or immigrant communities, things like that. So that's my hope for it. I'm really excited. Thank you to those that are willing to join me in this effort. But yeah, like I said, and as you guys come across stuff, you know, Ian has sent me some stuff that he comes across, like, I would appreciate it. The more eyes and ideas on these types of things, the better. It's going to make us better overall. So that's my intent. That's my goal here. And happy to answer any questions or get additional feedback if anybody has it. But that's what I wanted to talk about today.
Okay. Anybody else want to add on to that or have any questions for Claire?
I just want to thank Claire for taking the lead on it.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. It's gonna be great. I'm excited.
Yeah, and on that, like, introducing stuff, there might be, just as a full disclosure, there might be something where that as the commission may not, and we may have to go through and talk to the council and have the council do something like that. But that's what's floating in the back of my head right now as I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
But I would have to get clarity on that. I'm not as well versed in it, so.
That makes sense. Okay, great.
Anything else on this topic? All right. So I left quite a bit of time for wiggle room, for questions. I had a lot of topics requested, and thank you, everyone. I couldn't include them all. But that's why I kind of left some additional time for anybody to bring up questions of anything that was said or anything that wasn't said today, or additional topics that they just want to ad hoc throw in that we can have a quick chat about. In closing comments too, and leave a little bit more time for that. I know it's kind of, we have the discussion and you end up thinking like, oh wait, what about this one? What about that one? I know design guidelines have been kind of a big, for me too, are a big sticking point in that we have a lot of outdated design guidelines, and it's very much at the top of our radar. We use them every day. And when we're doing our administrative reviews, and when I'm assigning out projects, and when we're doing C of A's, it is one thing to mention. They're unfortunately harder to go in and tweak than I wish it could be, just based on some of our tools and resources, but it's there. And I think, we have a pretty good head start in like the almost 2 years this group has been around. We're working on Dinkytown. We're working on almost done, with Lyndhurst, and that was a district that came up. Washburn, Far Oaks, I know as a staff was our first line of like, yes, we need help on that one. We need to rewrite. But there's many more. And I think as we start to do some of these and, I'm hoping, apply for grant funds, we'll be able to kind of see a theme of maybe what works and what doesn't work with them. And it sounds like, better guidance on handling non-contributing resources seems to be a point of concern. But we're getting there, and trying to find a way and to be able to get to these. It'll take some time. But with that, let me just I'll open it up to anybody who wants to bring anything up or has questions, and we'll use that time. And if there's not, then we can close and move on with our Thursday night.
Andrea, I was curious, in the newer guidelines you're working on and this discussion with non-contributing buildings, are the newer guidelines going to include things on accessory dwelling units? I'm wondering if there should be a separate accessory dwelling unit guideline set, kind of like we see for signage, or if you're seeing that get integrated in the future into them. I'm imagining as the code gets, the ordinances and everything get updated to meet the new intent of the city with allowing, potentially an accessory dwelling unit on every single lot. I'd like us to be prepared for a potential influx of requests for them in historic districts. Especially, I guess, at least in my mind, I don't really see them as counter to historic districts. I think that they could be done really well and really interestingly, and like it could really be a thing. And I know I went to, I'm not sure if I'm the only one who went to the talk on accessory dwelling units in historic districts by the NACP.
Went to that one too. I can't remember
Yeah.
that years ago, and it wasn't. But
yeah, I guess because they had their program had one that was sort of specific guidelines for it, and that made me think that whether or not that's the direction we wanted to go, or whether you were planning to integrate it in these newer guidelines.
So my thought on those has been they're treated like a, an accessory or, structure, or like a garage or new construction. I know we've had some applications that have not come before you yet. They might actually soon. I think they're getting closer to being complete. So I won't give too much information, where there is either they're building like a completely separate building, and I don't think they're subdividing the lot. So I think it's an ADU. John is the one working on that one. But my thought is, treating them as new construction. They have to be compatible. They have to be subordinate, following still all the zoning code guidelines. But I feel like it's a bit of a Pandora's box if we try to open it up and try to add it to the 19 historic districts we have. And granted, you're not going to see too many in commercial districts, but I don't know, who knows? People can get very creative. But I think, if we can still apply the new construction, because accessory dwelling unit is a use, and, it sort of manifests itself in generally on top of a garage or as an addition to a building. And if it's an addition to an existing building, then it's an addition. And then if it's, on top of a garage, or you tear down a garage, we'll treat it like a garage with the unit on top of it. And I think that's kind of been my plan to help to deal with it and try to keep the use separate from the design part of it. Knowing that, we're gonna see a bunch of them, and we've already had people reach out to us quite a bit, at least in the last 2 months, interested in ADUs. And there'll be commission top or applications for something that big. But that's my thought on it. You can agree or disagree, I guess. I think from a workload standpoint, I'm like, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to go through and do that. But I think, like, from a policy perspective, I wanted to keep the use and the design part of it separate.
I guess I'm thinking about the one that we got before us already, where I think the biggest issue in terms of the guidelines was the whole subordinate to the structure, because if it's a garage and then you're putting basically a house on top of a garage, depending on how tall the original house was, visually it might not be subordinate. And so I guess, and I think in our discussion at that time, it was because we saw the housing and the need in the housing in the city as kind of a critical issue, was that subordinate a little more wishy-washy if it was an ADU, because we want to provide the housing in the districts, which is, kind of, yes, maybe it is opening up Pandora's box, because then we're prioritizing a use. On the other hand, maybe we should be prioritizing housing as a use. So I don't know. I get where you're coming from, though, from a workload standpoint.
I have not forgotten that project. Oh, I still gotta have nightmares from it. But anyways,
I should drive by and see if it's been built or not.
I don't
think
think
before
so.
the pandemic, so they might not have done it.
Came in for a permit. I could be wrong. I don't know. Maybe I signed it out and just like blocked it out of my memory. But yeah, we'll see. But I mean, and we can see how this goes. And I think it's going to be a little bit of baby steps to see, okay, what's the response we get? How many requests do we get? How are we going to handle them when we bring them? I mean, definitely that one comes to use. That was a really strange project, though, and strange other things with it. But, for a more traditional ADU that we'll see, at least with some of the calls I've been getting or requests I've been getting from people, I just had one today, actually. We'll see how it goes. And then I think with that, once we kind of see a few under our belt, figure out, okay, is this something we maybe really need to address more, or can we address it more with design? And I felt like we could address that one with design. But it was a strange thing because they had a weird lot, they had not a lot of coverage, and they had a giant property covering most of it, and there were a billion zoning issues with it. But anyways. But thank you, yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I know that's been a concern of yours for a while.
I think it's just nightmares from that first one and feeling like we weren't ready for it.
I felt, yeah, there were a lot of things said that I didn't feel ready for during all that conversation on that special project. But you know what, that's the fun of it. Margot, I saw you popped up for a moment. Do you have something you want to bring up?
Yes, I have an issue that came to me when we were conducting the discussion at the last meeting about 3400 DuPont. And I think it's a broader issue than that. But I thought I had missed something in the materials because I wasn't prepared for that First Amendment discussion, although I had seen the 1998 letter that talked about some sort of an agreement with the city, or an anticipated agreement. I'm not sure what it was. But my question is, do we have a way of trying to get these issues brought to the surface before the actual meeting? And what I'm thinking is it possible, there may not be time to do it, but is it possible that when the staff has their recommendation ready, they could solicit a brief statement of issues that the applicant or the owner might have? Because if the discussion had proceeded in such a way as the commission was going to refuse to allow the door to be, flipped around by the ramp, my inclination would have been to suggest that we lay the matter over until staff could consult with the city attorney to find out really what, how real is that First Amendment issue, or maybe they were making a contract issue related to what was in that letter. But I think that's a broader issue, not specific necessarily to the 3400 DuPont project. And it may be ultimately that the city would rather hold off on giving that advice until it gets to the council on appeal, and they can do it then and may not have to do it at all otherwise. But I think it would be helpful to us as commissioners to get an understanding of how should we proceed when unanticipated legal issues arise in the context of a public hearing. And if it were possible, I would think even beyond unanticipated legal issues, it might be helpful just to get a little more context from the owner or the applicant for whatever it is, realizing that they can always say whatever they want to say at the public hearing, and they can submit additional information. But it would have been helpful, I think, to have us know in advance that they were making a First Amendment argument about what was being proposed.
So I can say and I'll let John know because he worked with them, but we had a debrief on this in our staff meeting yesterday. I was floored by that when that came out. I immediately made some texts that got through to the city attorney and was like, holy moly. John, I don't know, I didn't know. I think John would have mentioned, did you have any idea they were going to make that? And we can talk a little bit more about it now. It's done. It's, we're still in the appeal period, but you have made your decision. And so I don't think we're violating any laws in that respect, but.
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so. We didn't really know.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I think it is a broader issue too. It's, it happened in this case, but I'm guessing it has happened and will happen again.
So, yep, that was another question that was brought up actually by Rob. Was like, how often has this happened? And sometimes I think to what you said, Margot, is we can't always control what an applicant's going to say on the record in testimony. I've heard a few interesting ones, especially in the almost couple years that I've been sitting up there and now sitting up there virtually. I was pretty floored by it, and what I can say at this point is I with some guidance from the city attorney, who I had some messages with, was why I said what I said, that they willingly engaged in the application. And my understanding not from my experience, but from others' experiences, at the end of the day, they can choose to make that argument generally it doesn't hold up in court.
Yeah, that could be, but I guess I think
that's not our purview.
And it would be interesting just even to know what the city attorney's position is on that kind of thing, so that we don't try to lay something over to get advice that they don't want to give in the first place, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and also like I think it was a little so caught off guard by that. It was something that it was just sort of, we are going to review the application in front of us. They came to us, they applied for it, they paid. You know, this was never, there was no mention of a First Amendment discussion or a religious freedom discussion. And that was a little like, oh my. Has it happened before? It probably has. I don't know of any. John may know of some where it's happened before. It just, I have my own personal feelings about that, you know, when it comes to something like that, where there was, you know, John wrote his staff report based on the information he had and the information they told him. So it was a little frustrating to hear it flipped in the testimony to say, oh no, we never said that, we're saying this. And I was like, well, yes, you did. You said it right here. You know, but at this end of the day, people can say what they want. You know, they can say and they can make their testimony and claim what they want to claim. But, you know, and I'm sure I'll probably have a debrief, you know, and I think if they do something, I did hear back from the city attorney, they weren't too worried about it with the way it ended up. But I think your point too about at this point, you know, you're reviewing what was in front of you according to the guidelines, that this was a weird one. I know a little bit about the funny history about when it got designated, and I don't know, I had forgotten about, or at least not known about the awkward 1997 end date period of significance, which I think kind of threw a wrench into an analysis. It did for us too when we were looking at it at a staff level. But, you know, ultimately it kind of, the punches really flow when it gets to council, and, you know, should it have gone on appeal, and then they can make that decision, you know. But at this point, they submitted an application. They knew they were submitting an application. It was kind of awkward how it came up, and kind of last minute being like, well, wait a minute, you know, it's like, well, if you want to apply that, why didn't you apply it before? But I'm, you know, I'm not going to go down that road. But if I have any more information that I hear from the attorney, if we do have more of a debrief on it, I can bring that up or let you know.
Yeah, I think it just would be helpful for the commissioners to know if those are issues beyond our purview and we should not take them into consideration. It would be good to know that. If in fact the city attorney and the council would prefer that those issues get addressed at our level, then we should probably stop and lay it over and get legal advice.
Yeah, generally they're not at your level, and they're generally not your purview. I mean, you have certain rules that you look at, you know, based on the guidelines and based on the bylaws. And that one, you know, it's definitely not the first time it's come up, at least in a land use perspective. I don't know what we've done about it in the past, other than that I just heard it doesn't hold up in court if they so choose to litigate. I'll try to leave it at that without giving my non-polite opinion. I don't know.
I did want to comment, Margot, that that was very unusual. We don't normally have people basically threaten litigation during their hearing. That's not normal.
Yes,
also on the working on this on the other side of things as the architect, the owner and the architect often get staff's official packet the same time we get staff's official packet. And so I know in discussions with owners, sometimes that morning of the hearing, you're still deciding what you're going to contend or discuss. So I think it would be difficult for staff to get a debrief from them of what they're planning to say in advance. Sometimes owners will be very fast and you'll actually see our packet gets amended before the meeting and it gets added to the public record, because they'll submit new drawings revising if they accept some things, or they'll write a letter saying which things they contend. Some of them will do that, but often they're kind of winging it, at least from what I've seen on the owner architect side of things. And so I assume staff encourages them to let them know in advance if they're going to contend staff's findings, but we don't always know.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, we don't always know either. Most of the time, though, fair amount of time, they'll let us know they're not happy with it, and then we know not to put it on consent.
Margot, I appreciate the fact that you have the legal background that would have thought to do something like holding it over until we could get some legal advice. And Annie, I appreciate that you were checking with the city council or the city attorney. I mean, we've been doing these remote meetings now for well over a year, and I really, really miss seeing everybody and being in the normal room. But we've had a few meetings where I'm very glad that my camera wasn't turned on, because I do not have a poker face, and this was one that I was just kind of like, where is this coming from? and you would have seen it on my face.
Hey, I can just say too, the applicant never mentioned anything about this sort of approach. We did see some evidence of it, that you saw as part of the design guidelines, where they did express some concerns regarding religious land use regulation. But they never did mention that. And in my mind, this was an issue that, was not something the HPC could really deal with. If the property could not be regulated by the HPC, then that was, something that called into question the whole idea of even designating not just this property, but every, religious institution that we have designated as part of a landmark or historic district in Minneapolis. And we have a lot. So the way the HPC made their determination, based upon the findings in the staff report, was, I thought, very appropriate. And then if the applicant chooses to pursue this larger legal issue, that's something that at the end of the day, it's not really in, the HPC's hands or staff members' hands like ourselves. It ends up going to the city attorneys who, determine the city's jurisdiction over regulating religious properties in general.
Yeah, that's a good explanation. I see Claire has some items she wants to bring up. I was trying to check mark it, and whatever reason my chat's not doing it. So go for it, Claire.
Well, so just a couple things. I've mentioned this a couple times. I'd like to be repetitive. Wondering if particularly CPED staff and other commissioners would be open and willing for us to have 2 retreats per year, one in the spring and one in the fall. I think that, we always have really good discussions, but it's hard to follow up on action items when we're only meeting once a year. So I would like to formally request that we have a retreat sometime maybe in October, where we follow up on some of these discussion items. Another thing that I'd like to make a formal request for is back when I first joined the commission, I think it only happened 1 year. And I mean, it's more complicated now because gathering is complicated and everything. But as gathering becomes safe again and everything, we used to have kind of a social hour around the holiday season that included the other commissioners from other city commissions and city council members. And I would really like it if we could bring that back, again, when it's safe to do so. But one of the other areas of consternation in our work is how disconnected we can be at times from the city council. And I think if the city council has an opportunity, and the other commissions, like the planning commission and stuff, if we have opportunities to meet each other in social settings where we can get to know each other a little bit better, I just think that it'll help all of us better understand where we're coming from in our decision making and everything like that. So I think there's a lot of value in a social scenario where we can all meet each other and talking without it being the formality of a meeting. So my requests are on a retreat in October and some type of a social gathering with all the commissioners and the council members at some point, and maybe around the holidays or whenever it makes sense.
I can respond to that. I'd say possibly November. I'm supposed to be out until, depending on when I have this child, maybe beginning of November. Give me a little time here and then to get back and then figure out and not tear my hair out. And we'll see how that looks too. So, but if the other thing we could do is like, if we want to just have like set one idea, and 2 of just like waiting, we can just have set months. Like we're going to have retreats in this month and this month each year, and we're just going to go forward and call it that. I don't mind that, unless we can plan for it that way. And then the only really logistics is just figuring out, once I get the the calendar for the next year to know when all the meetings fall, when to plug it in is one option too. And then as for, I actually talked to the supervisor for St. Paul yesterday, and I think he had discussed that their commission was interested in getting together when it was safe to do so. I think I have a while in that respect. I've got young children, but we'll see how that goes. So I think that definitely when things maybe get to kind of sort of normal someday in 21 or 22, I think that's completely doable. But you can talk about it right now if you want to do. I know the last one we did was August, and that was sort of weird scheduling that one, and then previously October. So I mean, they could be in, May and November. They could be like June and December, or, I don't know, roughly 6 months apart to try to keep everything current and going. I'm definitely open to that. December, I know it's funny. It seems like it's slower, but I always feel like by the time we get to December, there seems to always be a huge number of items on like the last meeting or two. But yet November seems to always, we've canceled meetings like the last 2 years in a row. So maybe November sometime, although I don't know what my life is going to look like in November. Not that my life should govern what's happening here in any means. But I mean, if, we could plan ahead, we could try to get things kind of set up and going before, and there for when I do get back. But
yeah, I think, I don't have a strong preference as to when they happen, just that they happen. My very strong preference is that they happen. When I first joined the commission, Fatima was the staff person, and now I think she's on the housing team, but she was very specific in when we would get our calendar, it would already have the HPC retreat on the calendar. So when it was distributed to us, it would have it. So that decision, the date of that decision was made before we even saw the calendar. So something like that makes sense to me. But then even it was only once a year, and I would like to do it twice a year, because I just think that we have too many of topics to only meet every 12 months to discuss. So.
Well, what do people think? I know exactly 6 months from now, it's roughly the holidays for almost Thanksgiving. What if putting something on, or just tentatively agreeing, and of course nobody knows what they're going to look like in this time, but like first week of December, something like that. I got to look at, actually, let me just pull up the meeting real quick schedule and see what our schedule looks like. Nope, that's not that one. I've got us, we only actually, this December might be good, because right now we're supposed to meet November 9th, November 30th. So depending when I have this child, I may be back for the November 9th one, I'm not sure. And then November 30th, I should definitely be back for. And then we only have December 14th for one meeting in December. So if we scheduled something, roughly first, second week of December, that wouldn't impinge too much on at least other meeting times and other agendas and staff reports and all that other fun stuff. So we could do something then. I would just have to figure out, make sure, do Thursdays generally work, or we could make it that other, I need a full calendar here, full Tuesday, if that, what do people like better? Do they like doing on Thursdays, or like Tuesdays is sort of just like, you're always on a Tuesday, that's kind of your HPC day. What do you think?
Well, I'm the only one with my camera on right now, so I'll just respond and then hope that other people will too. But I don't have a strong preference date, because as long as it's far enough out, I can plan around it. So it's other people's schedules are going to be a little bit more immobile than mine. All I have is 2 dogs and penchant for beers after 5 o'clock. So I'm fine with whatever.
Right now I've got like December, because if we meet on the 30th, if we have agenda items for that, it's like December 7th or December 9th. Or is the week before the 14th, and then afterwards things just get holiday and it gets hard to schedule things. So that is a possibility. December 7th being a Tuesday and December 9th being a Thursday.
Can I just vote for the 7th because my birthday is the 9th? Is that possible?
Totally possible.
I kind of like to go out to dinner. Thanks.
I like it.
But yeah, no, I'm usually fine with Tuesdays or Thursdays. I mirror Claire. I can probably make anything fit. I just always block off Tuesdays on my calendar so people don't book things on Tuesday afternoons, but I'm down for whatever works for everyone else. But just if you're gonna do it that week, I vote the 7th, please. Thanks.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say I agree that I think 2 a year is completely reasonable. And so getting it on the calendar early is what works best for me. As long as it's out there, I can plan around it.
And I'll keep this in mind for when we come up with the calendar for 2022, which we sometimes, and I don't know, it ends up being like November, December until we get the council calendar out. That sort of is the first line, and then we book everything around there. Are you guys okay with, I think not scheduling on a birthday is entirely legit. Yeah, December 7th.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone.
These things are long. I mean, they're helpful, but they're long. So I get it.
Yeah, I love it. I think that these are really great discussions, and I think we always have interesting conversations as a result. So yeah, and then like you say, Andrea, you know, like hopefully maybe next year gathering and stuff will be safer and we'll feel good about that. And so then, you know, if that's the case, then maybe hopefully maybe January or February of next year, we could do like a social hour with all the commissions and the council members. And to the extent that staff needs help coordinating or planning or doing any of that stuff, I'm happy to do that. I think it's a really valuable, the one time I attended one, I felt like it was incredibly valuable to get the opportunity to talk to other commissioners and everything. So would love to bring that back.
Yeah, and on that note, I think we'll kind of end with that since we're about the end here. I kind of alluded to it in our regular meeting on Tuesday, but yeah, you know, the city is essentially given a September 7th reopening date for staff members to be back in the office. And as I mentioned, you know, with some of these restrictions lifting, and if they stay, depending on what happens, we lose, you know, some of our abilities to meet virtually. And there's been no hard and fast decisions on how that's going to work. I think with, you know, downtown and parking and getting people and young children, you know, what's at the top of my mind of, you know, not being able to be, you know, vaccinated. I'm still very careful about where I go and what I can do. You know, I'm not sure yet what's going to happen. I for one, have actually really enjoyed some of these virtual meetings. I think it's brought an interesting dynamic and it has allowed us to organize things in a way that I didn't think was possible. And I love being able to be done. And then I just go down and pick up my kid too. So that's been helpful too, instead of, you know, fighting traffic or getting on the bus. But that, you know, it will be going back to in person, and this retreat in December, I'm not sure if it'll be in person or if it'll be virtual. I'm hope, you know, we have some new tools available to us to use to meet, and we'll see kind of where things end up. But once again, just to put that on your radars, and for new commissioners who's never met in council chambers, which I think is now almost half of you, it's at room 317 in City Hall. And I think you guys get parking vouchers. I'll figure that out later. And as for our clerk situation, I've mentioned it a little bit. You know, we switched that a little bit up come January, just to mention, and Ken's going to probably tell me what the correct version is here. We have Rachel, who runs our staffs and clerk star meetings virtually and will be in person. And then she kind of handles all the comments right up until a week before the meeting and stuff like that. And we'll hand things to you. But then, and pretty much anything before that is Lisa Baldwin, who works for CPED, and she kind of clerks behind the scenes and not physically for the meetings. you know, she gets the notices out, she takes the staff report, she does some of those other duties. So we kind of have two. So you'll notice I copy both of them if we have some clerking related topic to discuss, or if I'm reaching out to one of you about anything. So just FYI on that, to remind you, we kind of have two clerks now. And so far I think it's been going well. So, but we're still kind of working out some kinks in that system. Anything else? That's all I have to say, other than thank you very much for coming.
Annie, I just have a really quick comment I want to make about us all going back to City Hall. I'm hoping that we get some advanced warning as to when that will happen. So if we could at least get, like, you know, a month ahead of time, that would be great, so that I can start to prepare.
I hope so too.
As a transit rider at this point, even though I'm fully vaccinated and proud to say that, I am not comfortable getting on transit at this point, and so I would have to be sure that I could arrange to have the vehicle on those days and things like that, because we're a one vehicle household. So some advance warning would be good.
Barbara, I'm in the same boat. And I think I'll probably still be working from home, likely. And, you know, I don't know. The returning to downtown will be interesting. I know a lot of firms are in the same boat, but our firm's looking at moving to not be downtown anymore. And then I'm not sure how I would be getting to meetings, since I had the advantage of walking across the road, and now that might not be there. So, and I also am trying to.
And I could just hop off the train.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like how is it going to work? Are they going to put plexiglass up between each of our little, like, you know, like, are they increasing the ventilation in that room? I don't know. I have a lot of questions, I guess, if we have to go back to in person soon.
I agree. Yeah, I've got very similar concerns, and as soon as I know something, I agree. I'll try to let you know as soon as I can.
Thank you.
To know that. So yeah, I've got all the very same exact concerns. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming. It's 6 o'clock. Go enjoy the rest of your Thursday. See ya.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.